Former President Thabo Mbeki has urged African leaders to assert themselves globally as a force for change. Speaking at a high-level dialogue in Dar es Salaam, he said the upcoming G20 Summit must reflect Africa's challenges as well as aspirations, and themed Reigniting Africa's Renaissance. The event called for unity as well as strategic engagement in order to ensure Africa's voice is heard in global decision-making. Professor Isaac Khambule is a political and economic expert at the University of Johannesburg, and he joins me now for this conversation. Professor Khambule, a very good afternoon to you. Happy Africa Day. So the former President Mbeki, they're very vocal on his call for African leaders to basically claim their seat at the table and prove why they are there to fully represent the will of their people. A very unfamiliar sight, though, in the continent, where some leaders are so out of touch with the struggles of their own people that they don't even know what's happening right under their noses. This is a serious concern.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers as well, and happy Africa Day to everyone. Definitely, I mean, President Thabo Mbeki raised an important matter, because what often happens is the needs of African nations are not necessarily shared on global stages. And for once, South Africa will be hosting the G20 in November, and that paves way for Africa to put some of that developmental challenges at the forefront and be able to direct the discussions that are going to happen, and as well as to plead with some of the global developed nations to say these are the core issues that Africa is facing, and we are speaking with one voice, and this is what we need in order for us to be able to go forward. But as you've rightly indicated, some of the core issues are some of the leaders are unaware of the key challenges that face their populations, and then it becomes very important then for Africa to meet before the G20 so that they can be able to come up with a common agenda that they are going to take to the G20 in order to have a stronger voice.
Now, the issue, Professor, that Africa has come so far since colonialism, these are facts, yet we're still facing even harsher conditions as a people. Why is it impossible for the African people to progress and self-emancipate from the grips of inequality, having been blessed with so many resources to do so?
I mean, that's definitely one of the hotly contested debates about Africa's development. Some of them are blaming it on the dependency complex that Africa tends to have with the West, and some of them are also blaming its own internal issues. But I think from where we stand, we do know that from internal perspectives, there are core issues such as corruption, issues such as the mismanagement of public funds, issues such as the political leadership being unable to reason with the citizens, and as well as core issues of the issue of many African leaders not having a clear plan on how to develop their own nations. Because then once you do not have a clear plan on how to develop your own nation, the moment you go out to negotiate with other countries, you are bound to negotiate deals that are not going to produce the kind of economic outcomes for your particular country. But from where we're standing, I think it is very important and focal for African countries to look within and understand that majority of the challenges that we are facing are bound and they are born within the African continent. Because, for example, we are not investing in quality schools, we are not investing in quality infrastructure. You go to countries such as South Africa that are able to invest in infrastructure, but if you look at what has been happening over the last 10 years, you'll realize that there has been a lack of maintenance of that particular infrastructure. And this is a particular phase that many other African countries have went through, and they've been unable to really address the core infrastructure challenges that they still face to this particular day, because they were unable to then take ownership of their infrastructure. And we know infrastructure is at the core of economic development. So it is very important for all of these nations to come up with particular development strategies that are going to emphasize the issue of infrastructure being at the core, emphasize the issue of improving educational outcomes, and as well as building the necessary structures that we need to own our economy. Because I think that is one of the key points, again, that majority of Africa's economy tends to be controlled elsewhere. You look at your francophone countries, you'd realize that much of their economies are still largely controlled within countries such as France and many others. So it's very important to self-emancipate, but at the same time ensure that it is the local people who benefit from the rewards of such self-emancipation from an economic perspective, rather than being it an issue of the leaders and as well as the political elites being the ones who benefit instead of the entire citizen and as well as the populace.
And that, Professor, means that, of course, there are enablers there. The issue of leaders being accountable also is another serious concern, Professor. You have African leaders still in office, but residing in a different country altogether, under heavy criticism by their own people of being controlled by Western influence just so they can stay in power. Some have even gone as far as amending their own constitutions to remove term limits. Some have completely stifled out any opposition voices or parties within their countries, and some have been accused of questionable practices.
You've touched on the core issues that I believe that are not receiving sufficient attention in the African context. Because, for example, why do we have presidents that are African but then are residing in Western countries and governing from Western countries? And we've seen this in countries such as Cameroon. We are seeing this now lately with the Nigerian president. And that tells you that we are facing the lack of political leadership that is domestically grounded, there is again supporting the development of these particular nations. Because, for example, one of the core policies that need to be championed is if you are a public representative, you must utilize public services, you must utilize public transport, you must utilize public health. Not this case whereby majority of your citizens do not afford private healthcare and you utilize private healthcare from other countries, because you are basically indicating that you do not have any confidence in the public healthcare of your particular country. So how do we then get the necessary leaders that are going to be born and bred and also say, I'm committed to the development of my country and I will usher this particular period by leading in the forefront and by ensuring that we build our own domestic economies, we build capacities to address any pandemics or epidemics that we face as African nations. Because without that type of leadership, Africa is unlikely to move forward. And lastly, I think one of the core points is we do not have sufficient what we call industrial leaders, because again, most of our industrial bases tend to be controlled outside. So how do we build an industrial base that is going to promote the Africa we want, and Africa whereby it is mainly financed by African leaders or African business leaders instead of always begging for foreign direct investment? For now, we need to really invest in our own economy so that they are not controlled elsewhere, and African countries will be able to then control the pace at which their economies grow.
Professor, great conversation. Thank you so much for that. That is Professor Isaac Khambule. There is a political economist weighing in on the call for Africa to claim its rightful place in the geopolitical arena and also be part of policy making as per the annual Africa Day lecture by former President Thabo Mbeki.